They called her Tala, the tall woman of the southern Apache lands. She stood taller than any woman in the village, with shoulders broad like the hills and hands strong enough to lift a barrel alone. But her size, which once made her useful for carrying water and gathering wood, became the reason people whispered behind her back. They said she was too big to marry, too strange to belong, too different to bear children. Some called her the Giantess. Others laughed when she walked by. Still, Tala kept her head down and worked from sunrise to sunset, trying not to let the words hurt her heart. The winter came harsh that year. The cattle were thin and food was hard to find. Traders came riding through, offering coins and salt in exchange for anything they could carry away. One man looked at Tala as if she was not a person but something else, something heavy and strong enough to be sold. Her tribe was desperate, and rumors spread like wind through dry grass. When she overheard her name being mentioned in trade talk, her chest tightened. She thought it was a cruel joke. But the next morning they told her to pack her things. She was no longer part of them. Tala walked behind the trader's wagon, her wrists loosely tied, not as a prisoner but as property. She did not fight. She did not cry. She had no tears left. For years she had done everything right, worked, obeyed, stayed kind, but still ended up unwanted. The trader sold her from camp to camp, each buyer promising work but always treating her less than human. One day a group of men talked in low voices about sending her to a far ranch where meat was scarce. They joked that even her body could bring profit if nothing else. Tala heard enough to know her time was running out. The trader's wagon broke down near a small settlement by the dry river. She was left there for the night, tied near the corral. The wind blew dust in her face and she sat quietly staring at the stars. She whispered to the sky in her native tongue, asking her ancestors why her life had become like this. No answer came, only the sound of horses snorting in the dark. She closed her eyes, ready for whatever morning would bring. Before dawn, a cowboy came riding through on a tired brown horse. His name was Caleb Hart, a quiet man who lived alone in the high plains after losing everything: his wife, his herd, and his hope. He had stopped believing people could be kind anymore. He came to trade salt and flour, and that's when he saw her, taller than any woman he'd seen, sitting in the dust with her hands tied, her eyes calm and proud even in misery. Something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the sadness that looked too familiar, like he was staring into his own past. Caleb asked the trader who she was. The man laughed and said she was a useless woman, too large for work, too wild for a home, and that he planned to sell her at the next fair. Caleb frowned. "What's her name?" he asked. The trader shrugged. "She don't speak much. Call her what you want." Caleb looked at her again, her face half hidden under her long dark hair. "How much?" he asked quietly. The trader laughed again, but then gave a number. Caleb didn't argue. He untied a small leather pouch from his belt and dropped a few silver coins into the man's hand. Then he walked over and cut the rope around Tala's wrists. Tala looked up at him, not understanding what he wanted. He offered his hand, but she hesitated. No man had touched her with kindness in a long time. "You're free now," Caleb said simply. She didn't know what that meant anymore. She looked around, confused, then pointed to herself and whispered, "Free?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You don't belong to anyone." The trader laughed as he rode away, saying Caleb would regret wasting money on her. But Caleb didn't answer. He just looked at Tala and said, "There's an empty seat behind my saddle if you want to ride. You can come to my ranch till you figure things out." She looked toward the horizon, unsure if she should trust him. Finally, she nodded. She climbed up behind him with slow care, afraid the horse might buckle under her weight. But the horse carried them steady, mile after mile into the hills. By noon, they reached Caleb's small ranch. The land was dry and quiet, the house made of old pine and stone. He showed her the barn, the well, and the porch where he sat every evening. "You can rest inside," he said. "No one will bother you here." Tala looked around with wide eyes. Everything was old but clean. She touched the wooden beams like they were sacred. That night she slept by the fire for the first time in years, her hands free, her heart unsure if she was still dreaming. Days turned into weeks. Caleb worked the land, fixing fences and caring for his few remaining animals. Tala began helping him without being asked. She cleaned the barn, carried water, and cooked simple meals. He noticed how gentle she was with the animals, how the old horse leaned its head against her shoulder when she spoke. At first they barely talked. She spoke little English and he knew only a few Apache words. But somehow they understood each other through small gestures. Her smile, his quiet nod, the way he left extra bread by her plate. One afternoon, Caleb found her standing near the fence watching the sunset. She looked taller than the sky itself, her hair catching the orange light. "You ever want to go back?" he asked. She shook her head. "No more back," she said softly. "Only forward." He nodded, understanding more than her words. From that day, he began teaching her how to ride, how to plant seeds, and how to mend leather. She learned fast, laughing for the first time in years when a young foal tried to nibble her sleeve. People from town started whispering about the strange pair, a tall Apache woman and a quiet cowboy living together. Some mocked him for bringing her in, but Caleb didn't care. He'd seen worse in life, and he knew what loneliness could do to a soul. One evening, a young boy from town stopped by and said, "Mr. Hart, folks are saying she ain't normal." Caleb looked up from his work and said calmly, "Maybe that's why she fits just fine here. Normal's never done me any good." That night, Tala sat by the fire, weaving a small blanket from old yarn. Caleb asked, "What are you making?" She smiled shyly. "Gift," she said. "For you. You take me from chains. I make warmth for you." He looked at the blanket, rough but full of care, and for the first time in many years his heart felt alive again. "Thank you, Tala," he said quietly. "You already brought more warmth than I ever hoped for." As the days passed, the land grew greener after a sudden rain. Flowers bloomed near the porch and birds returned to the fields. Tala began to sing sometimes while she worked, her deep voice soft and peaceful. Caleb would stop and listen, pretending to fix something just to hear her longer. One morning, he found her standing at the barn door, sunlight on her face. She turned and smiled, a real smile this time, and in that simple moment, Caleb knew he had not rescued her. They had rescued each other, but peace in the West never lasted long. A letter came from the trading post saying someone was searching for a runaway woman, tall, strong, and worth a bounty. Caleb folded the letter and stared at the horizon. He didn't tell her yet. He just said softly, "We might have to ride soon." She looked at him confused but saw the worry in his eyes. She nodded slowly, trusting him without needing to ask why. That night, as the wind howled outside and the fire burned low, Caleb watched her sleep near the hearth. He thought about the journey ahead, about how fate had brought them together. And though danger waited beyond the hills, one thing was clear in his heart. He would not let her be taken again, not while he was still breathing. The morning after the letter came, Caleb saddled his horse earlier than usual. The air was cool and mist rolled across the field like soft smoke. Tala stood on the porch, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, watching him quietly. She could sense something had changed. He was different that morning, his movements careful, his eyes distant. When she walked closer, he smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ride with me?" he asked softly. She nodded, not knowing where he planned to go. They rode along the ridge where the land stretched far into the horizon. The sky was wide and pale blue with hawks circling above. For a while they rode in silence, only the sound of hooves and wind between them. Finally, Caleb stopped his horse near an old oak tree. He took out the folded letter from his coat and handed it to her. "Someone's looking for you," he said gently. She frowned, trying to understand the words on the paper. He explained slowly, "They want to take you back. Some trader wrote about a tall Apache woman, said she ran away and belongs to someone now." Tala's hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. She didn't understand how a person could belong to anyone. "I know belong," she said firmly, shaking her head. "No more belong," Caleb nodded. "I know. And you won't. Not while I'm here." He meant every word. But the truth was, life in the West didn't follow fairness or mercy. Laws were written by whoever held the most power. And those traders had money and friends in the sheriff's office. He knew it wouldn't be long before someone rode out to claim her. When they returned home, Caleb began preparing quietly. He mended the wagon, packed food and water, and sharpened old tools. He didn't tell her everything, but Tala could feel the tension in his shoulders. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she helped him, filling sacks with grain, baking bread, collecting herbs from the hill. Her silence spoke louder than words. She understood he was trying to protect her, and that was enough. That night, she sat near the fire while he worked by the door. The flames made his face look tired but strong. After a while, she said softly, "Why you help me, Caleb?" He looked up, surprised by her sudden question. She met his eyes and added, "You could leave me, easy, why you stay?" He sighed and leaned back on his chair. "Because I know what it feels like to be thrown away," he said. "I was once like you. Folks said I was no good after my wife died. They stopped talking to me, stopped coming around. I almost sold the ranch, but something kept me here. Then you came. You gave this place life again. Maybe I just didn't want to lose that." Tala looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes glistened in the firelight. "You good man," she said simply. "You see heart, not skin, not size," he smiled faintly. "And you're stronger than anyone I've ever known, Tala." The next day, a rider appeared from town, a tall man in a black hat with papers in his coat pocket. He claimed he had business with Caleb. The man spoke politely, but his tone was sharp. He said he was sent to collect a runaway woman who belonged to a certain trading company. Caleb listened, his hands still and calm. "There's no runaway here," he said quietly. "Only someone who's free." The man frowned. "That woman in your house, she matches the description. Big woman, Apache, speaks broken English. You can't hide her, mister. They've got papers saying she was bought fair and legal." Caleb stood up slowly. His voice stayed low, steady. "Then those papers are wrong. She's not property." The man looked at him coldly, then spat in the dirt. "You'll regret this. She ain't worth the trouble." He turned his horse and rode off. Dust followed him down the trail. That night, Caleb told Tala everything. "They'll come again," he said. "Maybe with more men. We can't stay here." She didn't cry or panic. She just walked to the corner and began gathering her few things. A small blanket, her woven bag, and a necklace she'd made from wild seeds. Then she looked at him and said, "Where we go, I go with you." They left before sunrise. The wagon moved slow through the narrow trails, with Caleb leading the horse and Tala sitting beside him, her long hair tied back. They traveled toward the high canyons where few dared to go. The land grew wilder and quieter, filled with the scent of pine and dry wind. Days passed. They slept under stars, shared dried meat and biscuits, and took turns keeping watch. Tala's strength helped them cross rivers and push the wagon through mud. Caleb often looked at her in awe, how someone who had suffered so much could still smile when the morning sun hit her face. One evening, as they rested by a stream, Tala picked up a small stone shaped like a heart and placed it in his hand. "Keep," she said. "Good luck." He looked at it and smiled. "You think I'll need it?" She nodded. "Yes, world not kind. But you kind. Kind needs luck." He held the stone tightly. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like the most valuable thing he'd ever received. After a week of travel, they reached an old abandoned mission hidden deep in the hills. The walls were cracked, but the roof still held. They cleaned it, built a fire inside, and decided to stay. For the first time in many days, they felt safe. Months passed quietly. Caleb started raising goats and Tala grew corn near the stream. The land began to bloom again, and so did their bond. They spoke more now, teaching each other words, laughing at small mistakes. She learned to say home and pointed at the mission. He nodded, repeating the word softly, home. One evening, while rain fell gently on the roof, Caleb found her standing by the door, watching the water. He walked up behind her and said, "You know, I think maybe this was always meant to be. You finding me finding you." She turned to him, her eyes warm. "Maybe sky plan," she said. "Sky sends storm, but storm show shelter." He didn't answer, but his heart felt full. Time went by and people forgot about the bounty. No one came searching anymore. The world moved on. Tala became known in nearby settlements as the strong woman, who helped travelers fix wagons or gave food to the poor. Children loved her stories about the stars and women admired her courage. Caleb watched her with quiet pride. One summer afternoon, as the sun dipped low, he saw her helping a neighbor's child carry water. The little girl looked up and asked, "Miss Tala, you really a giant?" Tala laughed, a soft, deep laugh that echoed across the valley. "Maybe little," she said, holding out her big hand, "but heart same size as yours." The child giggled and hugged her leg, and Caleb smiled from the porch, knowing those simple words carried more truth than anything he'd ever heard. That night, as they sat by the fire, Caleb said, "You ever think about what they called you before? Those cruel words?" She shook her head. "No more hurt. I not made for their eyes. I made for my own path, he nodded. And I'm just lucky I found it too. The wind outside grew gentle, brushing against the window. The world was quiet. He took her hand, rough, warm, and steady. You ever think about staying forever? He asked softly. She looked at him, surprised, then smiled slowly. I already stay, she said. Long time ago. When you cut rope. Caleb didn't speak after that. He just looked at her, and something in his chest eased at last. For years he had been a man of silence and sorrow, but she brought him peace. Real, quiet peace that words couldn't describe. As seasons changed, they built a life together in that hidden valley. Travelers would sometimes pass by and speak of the cowboy and the tall Apache woman who lived beyond the canyon, two souls who refused to let the world decide their worth. They were different, yet they fit together like the land and the sky. And when people asked how it all began, Caleb would smile and say, she was marked for slaughter once. But to me, she was never too big. She was just the right size for the heart that needed her.